Clara's life had been a series of sudden turns, each one knocking her off balance. She had never imagined that a string of bad luck could leave her standing on the edge of town with nothing but a small suitcase and the clothes on her back. She had lived most of her adult life in the city, where the streets were crowded and the noise never seemed to end. She had an apartment that felt like her own little world. But rent had gone up again, and her savings were gone faster than she could count. One day, she had walked out of her apartment for the last time, locking the door behind her and trying to convince herself that she could start over somewhere else. Somewhere simpler, somewhere quiet, somewhere she could breathe. The town she arrived in was nothing like the city. It was small, with dusty roads and wide-open fields stretching in every direction. A few buildings lined the main street, including a general store, a cafe that smelled faintly of coffee and baked bread, and a gas station with peeling paint. There was a calmness here that Clara both admired and feared. The town moved slower than the city she had left behind. People didn't rush past each other. They stopped, greeted, and looked each other in the eye. It made her nervous. She had been used to blending into the crowd, invisible and safe. Here, she felt exposed. She walked with her suitcase clutched tightly, trying to keep her head down. Her first priority was a place to stay, somewhere she could rest and think. She didn't want to rely on anyone. But the options in such a small town were limited. Most of the motels were full, and even the few rooms for rent seemed out of reach for her thin wallet. She wandered past the dusty streets, glancing at the houses set back from the road. Some were small and tidy, with flower beds in the front yards. Others were large and weathered, their paint cracked and faded. And then, she saw it. A ranch, on the edge of town. It was bigger than the other homes, with a wide porch, a barn in the distance, and fields stretching far beyond. Smoke curled lazily from a chimney, and the smell of wood and hay filled the air. It looked warm and safe, like a place that had its own heartbeat. Clara paused. She didn't know who lived there, or if anyone would even talk to a stranger. But she felt drawn to the ranch. Something about it spoke to her, a promise of shelter and quiet that she hadn't felt in a long time. She took a deep breath and walked up the gravel path, her suitcase wheels crunching softly against the stones. A man appeared on the porch. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and strong, with hands that looked like they had done years of hard work. His hair was dark, streaked with gray, and his face was lined, not just from age but from years under the sun and wind. Clara noticed the faint scars along his forearms and the one on his cheek, and she realized that he had lived a life full of challenges, just like her. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his voice calm but carrying authority. He didn't seem surprised to see her, just curious. Clara hesitated, feeling her pride tugging at her. She wasn't used to asking for help, and she didn't like the way it made her stomach twist with unease. I'm looking for a place to stay," she said finally, keeping her voice steady. "I don't have anywhere else to go." The man studied her for a moment, his eyes searching, not in judgment, but in understanding. "You'll have to stay on the ranch," he said, after a pause. "I have a small guest house. It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry." Clara blinked. The offer shocked her. She had expected doors to be closed, to hear a polite no, or even laughter at her situation. But here was a man offering her a place to stay without hesitation, without question. Her pride bristled. I can pay," she said, pulling out her wallet, though it was nearly empty. Jack shook his head gently. "Don't worry about that. You need a place more than I need the money. You can work around the ranch if you want. But it's up to you." Clara wanted to refuse. She wanted to turn and leave, insisting that she could find another solution, even if it meant sleeping in her car or walking to the next town. But something about the way Jack looked at her, steady, patient, kind, made her pause. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll stay." Jack led her along a path lined with wildflowers and overgrown grass. The guest house was small, with a wooden porch and windows that let in the morning light. Inside, it smelled faintly of cedar and dust, and the air was cooler than outside, carrying the scent of hay from the barn nearby. The furniture was simple but sturdy. A bed with a quilt, folded neatly on top, a table and chairs, and a small stove in the corner. Clara felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. She had a place to rest, a place that felt safe. As she unpacked her few belongings, she noticed Jack lingering at the doorway. He didn't speak, just watched her with quiet patience. Finally, she asked, "Do you live here alone?" He nodded. "Mostly. I have some help now and then, but I've been on this land a long time. It takes a lot of work to keep it going. That's why I offered you a place. You can stay, help if you want, or just rest." Clara wasn't used to this kind of generosity. Most people in her life had expected something in return for kindness. Here, it seemed simple. He saw her in need, and he offered help. She felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the next few hours, Clara explored the ranch. She walked past fields where horses grazed lazily, their tails flicking at flies. She passed the barn, filled with the smell of hay and animals, and the sound of soft snorts and the shuffle of hooves. She found herself smiling at the simplicity of it all, a feeling she hadn't had in a long time. Life here was different. Life here was real. Jack returned in the late afternoon, carrying a bucket of water. "You'll need this for the stove," he said, handing it to her. She took it, feeling the weight and warmth of it. It wasn't just water. It felt like a symbol of survival, of being seen and cared for. They worked in silence for a while, the quiet stretching comfortably between them. Clara felt something shift inside her. She realized that maybe asking for help didn't make her weak. Maybe, just maybe, it could be the first step toward something better. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the fields, Clara stood on the porch of the guest house and looked out at the wide-open sky. She thought about the city she had left behind, the noise, the crowded streets, the constant rush. And she thought about this place, with its calm, its space, and the man who had offered her a chance to start over. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, or how long she would stay. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a small sense of peace. That night, as she lay in the bed of the guest house, listening to the wind rustle through the trees and the soft sounds of animals settling in for the night, Clara realized that this was more than just a temporary stay. It was a chance to rebuild, a chance to see herself not as someone who had lost everything, but as someone who still had hope. And deep down, she knew that meeting Jack, the scarred rancher, who had offered her shelter without asking for anything in return, was the beginning of something that might change her life forever. Clara had spent her first night at the guest house in a state of restless sleep. The unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the soft neighing of horses, the rustle of trees in the wind, and the occasional lowing of cows, kept her alert, yet strangely comforted. Waking up to the sun streaming through the small window, she realized how much her body craved this simplicity. It was a different kind of life, one that asked nothing but presence and effort. She stretched, feeling muscles she hadn't known she used in years, and got up to face her first full day on the ranch. Jack was already outside, tending to the horses. He moved with a quiet confidence, each step deliberate, hands skilled from years of labor. Clara watched him for a moment from the doorway of the guest house. There was something about the way he worked, methodical, patient, steady, that made her feel small but not insignificant. She felt a pang of self-consciousness. She knew she wasn't used to physical work, and she worried about looking clumsy or slow. Still, There was an undeniable pull to step outside, to be part of the rhythm of the ranch. "You're up early," Jack said without turning, tossing hay to one of the horses. His voice was calm, not questioning, just noticing. "I couldn't sleep," Clara admitted, walking toward him. "Everything's so new, so different." Jack nodded, giving a small smile. "It takes time to adjust. The ranch has its own pace. It's slower than the city, but it's honest." Clara hesitated, then decided to try helping. She carried a bucket of feed to the horses, her hands trembling slightly from the weight. One of the smaller horses nudged her shoulder, curious, and she laughed, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. Jack watched, giving her subtle guidance without hovering. "Steady," he said. "Let it be gentle. Horses notice fear." She nodded, trying to steady her hands, and felt a strange sense of accomplishment when the feed was distributed. Jack gave a quiet nod of approval. "Not bad for a city girl," he said, and for the first time, Clara allowed herself a smile. The day moved slowly but meaningfully. Jack introduced her to other chores, carrying water to the animals, helping clean the barn, and checking fences. At first, she struggled, often fumbling with tasks or misjudging the effort required. But Jack was patient, never scolding, only showing her the correct way to lift, carry, or secure. There was an unspoken rhythm in their cooperation, a wordless understanding growing between them. Clara realized that she had been so focused on keeping control of her life in the city that she had never truly appreciated teamwork. Here, she was learning the value of it in a way that felt organic, natural, and grounding. By midday, they took a break under the shade of a large oak tree. Clara sat on the grass, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, while Jack leaned against the tree, taking a sip from his water bottle. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward. For the first time in a long time, Clara felt she could just be herself without putting on a mask. "You know," Jack said, after a long pause, "most people wouldn't make it here. The ranch isn't easy. It takes patience and stubbornness, sometimes in equal measure." Clara looked up at him. "I've been stubborn all my life," she said softly. "Sometimes too much. It's why I got into trouble in the city. I wanted to do everything on my own, without asking for help. Maybe I'm learning that's not always the best way." Jack gave a faint smile, as if he understood completely. Learning that lesson late is better than never. Pride can keep you safe, but it can also keep you alone. The words settled in her mind like seeds, small but growing. Clara realized she had spent years defending herself from the world, never letting anyone close enough to help. Yet here, she felt a quiet shift. The ranch, the chores, and even Jack's presence were opening cracks in her defenses. She felt vulnerable. Yes, but also alive in a way she hadn't been for years. As the afternoon sun rose high in the sky, they moved to mend a section of the fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. Clara watched Jack assess the break, noting the splintered wood and bent wire. He didn't rush, taking his time to plan the repair. Clara followed his lead, hammering nails and holding posts as best as she could. Her hands ached by the end, but she didn't mind. There was pride in the effort, and Jack's occasional nods of encouragement made it worthwhile. When they finally finished, they stepped back to admire their work. The fence wasn't perfect, but it held strong. Clara wiped sweat from her brow and laughed quietly. "I didn't think I'd enjoy this, or that I could do it." Jack shrugged, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It's not about perfection. It's about persistence." Evening approached, and the ranch began to quiet. Clara found herself standing near the barn, watching the horses settle down for the night, feeling a strange sense of contentment. Jack joined her, carrying a lantern. They walked back to the guest house together, the soft glow casting long shadows on the ground. Inside, Clara cooked a simple dinner on the stove, a can of soup, and some bread she had bought from the town earlier. Jack didn't interfere. He sat quietly at the table, watching her work. When the meal was ready, they ate in companionable silence. Clara found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. The city had demanded constant attention, constant movement, and constant pretense. Here, she could just exist, and it felt almost revolutionary. After dinner, Jack suggested she take a walk before nightfall. Clara agreed, and together they wandered along the edge of the property, where the fields opened into hills and the sky stretched wide and endless above them. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of grass and earth. Clara breathed deeply, letting the calm wash over her. "You know," Jack said, breaking the comfortable silence, "most people think of the ranch as just land and animals. But it's more than that. It's history. It's struggle. It's hope. Every day. You see, we fight the weather, we fight ourselves, but we also get moments like this, peace, calm, quiet, that makes the hard work worth it." Clara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She thought about her life in the city, the noise, the rush, the loneliness, and realized she had been searching for something like this all along, though she hadn't known it. The ranch wasn't just a place to stay. It was a place where she could learn, grow, and perhaps even heal. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, Clara and Jack returned to the guest house. Clara felt a newfound respect for him, not just for his strength and skill, but for the kindness he had shown her without expectation. There was no judgment in his offer of shelter, no hidden motive, just a simple, human connection. It was something Clara had almost forgotten existed, and it left her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she reflected on the day's events. She had worked hard, learned new skills, and shared quiet moments with Jack that felt meaningful, even if they were small. She realized that accepting help did not make her weak, as she had always feared. Instead, it had opened the door to trust, understanding, and perhaps something more. Lying in the bed, listening to the distant sounds of the animals and the wind through the trees, Clara felt the first real sense of hope she had experienced in a long time. She knew the days ahead would be challenging, that life on the ranch required effort, patience, and resilience. But she also knew that she was no longer entirely alone. Jack's presence was steady, reassuring, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she didn't have to fight everything on her own. Clara drifted to sleep with a quiet determination. She would face the ranch, its work, and its challenges head-on. She would learn, adapt, and grow. And maybe, just maybe, she would find a place in this world where pride and vulnerability could coexist, where independence didn't mean isolation, and where a scarred rancher had unknowingly offered her more than shelter, he had offered her a chance at hope. The morning started with a strange stillness in the air. Clara woke to the quiet hum of the ranch, but something felt different. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds that pressed low over the hills, and a cool wind stirred the trees with an urgency she hadn't felt before. Jack was already outside, checking the fences and walking the boundaries of the ranch with a serious expression. Clara quickly dressed and stepped outside, feeling the tension in the air. "Storm's coming," Jack said, glancing at her. "Looks like a big one. We need to make sure everything's secure before it hits." Clara felt a flutter of anxiety. Storms in the city had always meant rain, maybe a little wind, and then life went on. Here, storms meant work, preparation, and sometimes danger. She didn't want to be useless, but she also worried about making mistakes. "What can I do?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You can help with the barn. Make sure the animals are safe. I'll handle the fences and gates." 40s. Aldarg. Clara took a deep breath and moved to the barn, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Inside, she found the animals restless. The horses shifted nervously, their ears twitching, while the cows lowed softly. Clara knew that calming them was just as important as securing the barn. She spoke to them gently, stroking their coats and moving carefully among them. Slowly, the animals began to relax, responding to her quiet presence. Outside, Jack worked tirelessly, his hands moving with experience and strength. Clara watched as he checked each fence, tightened wires, and reinforced posts against the coming wind. She noticed his scars again, the lines on his arms and face that told of past struggles. He didn't complain, didn't slow down. Watching him, Clara felt a mixture of admiration and a strange tenderness. She realized how much he had endured, how much he had built with his own hands, and yet he still offered her kindness without hesitation. As the morning passed, the sky darkened further. The wind picked up, whipping the trees and rattling the barn doors. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, pounding the ground and turning the dirt paths into thick mud. Clara felt a shiver run through her, but she didn't leave the barn. She stayed with the animals, making sure they were calm, checking their water and feed, and listening to the storm rage outside. Jack came in occasionally, checking on her and giving quick instructions. "Move that haystack closer to the wall," he said, pointing. The wind could blow it over. Clara did as he said, feeling her muscles ache from lifting and carrying, but also feeling a strange sense of pride. She was doing something meaningful, something necessary. By midday, the storm had reached its full force. Rain fell in torrents, and the wind howled like a living thing, bending the trees and shaking the barn. Clara and Jack worked together, side by side, securing gates, moving animals to safer areas, and covering fragile equipment. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. Clara's hands were raw, her clothes soaked through. But she didn't stop. She had never felt so alive, so connected to the world and to another person. During a brief lull in the storm, Jack wiped the rain from his face and looked at Clara. "You're doing well," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Most people would have panicked by now. You've got courage." Clara shook her head, trying to ignore the warmth rising in her chest. "I'm just trying not to mess up," she admitted. "I've never done anything like this before." Jack smiled faintly. "That's the thing about life on the ranch. None of us have all the experience. We learn as we go. And sometimes, the only way through is together." The storm continued, unrelenting. Clara noticed how Jack moved with precision, how he seemed to anticipate problems before they happened. She realized how much she relied on him, not just for guidance, but for calm in the chaos. He was steady when everything else was wild and unpredictable. Watching him, Clara felt a deep admiration and a sense of trust she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. As evening approached, the rain finally began to lighten, though the wind still howled. The barn and animals were safe, the fences mostly intact, but the storm had left its mark. Trees were bent, debris scattered across the fields, and the mud was thick and slippery. Clara and Jack stood side by side, surveying the damage. Both were exhausted, soaked through, and covered in mud, but there was a sense of accomplishment in their silence. "You did good today," Jack said finally, his voice soft. "You didn't panic. You helped when it mattered most." Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had expected him to be proud of his own work, but here he was, acknowledging hers. "Thank you," she said quietly. I couldn't have done it without you." Jack shook his head. "You could have. We did it together." That night, after the storm had passed, Clara sat by the small stove in the guest house, drying her clothes and warming her hands. She thought about the day's events, about the fear she had felt, and the satisfaction of overcoming it. More than that, She thought about Jack, about how he had guided her, protected the ranch, and offered support without judgment. She realized how much she trusted him and how much she valued his presence in her life. Jack joined her in the guest house, carrying a small lantern. He didn't speak at first, just sat across from her, watching the flickering light cast shadows on the walls. Clara felt a strange sense of closeness, a connection that went beyond words. "You know," Jack said after a while, "storms are like life. They come out of nowhere. They test you, and they leave you tired. But they also show you who you really are, and who you can rely on." Clara nodded slowly. "I never thought a storm could feel like a lesson," she admitted. "But today, I saw what I'm capable of. And I saw what it means to trust someone." Jack's eyes softened. "Trust is earned, yes, but it's also something we have to allow. You did that today. You trusted yourself, and you trusted me. That's no small thing." They talked for hours, sharing stories of the past, of hardships and mistakes, of lessons learned the hard way. Jack told Clara about his youth, the mistakes he had made, and the love he had lost. Clara listened, feeling a new depth of understanding for the man she had met only days ago. His scars weren't just physical, they were emotional. Reminders of pain endured and resilience built. In turn, Clara shared her story, her struggles in the city, the loss of her home, and the fear of relying on anyone again. Jack listened without judgment, his presence steady and reassuring. For the first time, Clara felt completely seen, as if her story mattered to someone who understood the weight of life's challenges. By the time they retired for the night, Clara felt a shift within herself. The storm had been more than a test of endurance. It had been a turning point. She realized that she didn't have to face life alone, that accepting help didn't diminish her strength, and that love and care could exist even in unexpected places. As she lay in the guest house bed, listening to the gentle dripping of rain from the eaves and the distant creaking of the barn, Clara thought about the day's lessons. She had discovered courage she didn't know she had, resilience she had forgotten, and trust she had been too afraid to embrace. She also knew that her connection with Jack had deepened in ways that frightened and excited her at the same time. For the first time in a long time, Clara allowed herself to hope not just for survival, but for something more. A future where she could belong, where she could build a life with meaning, and where she could allow herself to care for someone as deeply as she cared for herself. Jack, the scarred rancher who had offered her shelter, guidance, and patience, had unknowingly given her more than just safety. He had offered her a chance to believe in love, trust, and second chances. Outside, the sky cleared, revealing a tapestry of stars that sparkled above the ranch. Clara watched them from the guest house window, feeling a quiet sense of peace. The storm had passed, leaving behind evidence of its fury, but also a sense of renewal. She realized that life, much like the ranch, required work, patience, and resilience. And sometimes, it required opening one's heart to another person, letting them in, and learning that love could grow even from the most unexpected beginnings. Clara closed her eyes, a small smile touching her lips. The storm had tested her, challenged her, and changed her. But it had also shown her the path to something she had longed for without even knowing it, a life filled with hope, trust, and the possibility of love. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt ready to walk that path, no longer alone, no longer afraid, and ready to embrace whatever came next. The morning after the storm was calm and clear. Sunlight poured over the hills, glinting off the wet leaves and illuminating the mud-spattered fields. Clara stepped outside, taking in the beauty of the ranch in the quiet aftermath. The storm had left its marks, but it had also washed the land clean, giving it a fresh, almost hopeful feel. She inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp air fill her lungs and a sense of calm settle over her. Jack was already outside, surveying the damage. A few fence posts had snapped, and some of the smaller trees had fallen. He worked steadily, repairing the damage, moving with the same precision and patience he always showed. Clara felt a mixture of admiration and affection as she watched him, realizing just how much he had endured in his life, and how quietly he carried his burdens. "Morning," Jack said, looking up as Clara approached. His face was tired, but there was a faint smile playing on his lips. "Morning," she replied softly. "Do you need help?" Jack shook his head. "I'll manage this part. You can finish checking on the animals and the barn. Make sure everyone is settled." Clara nodded, feeling a sense of responsibility and pride. She moved through the barn, ensuring the animals were comfortable and fed. They seemed calmer now, more at ease after the storm, and Clara felt a deep satisfaction in knowing she had contributed to their care. She worked methodically, checking water buckets, brushing horses, and making sure the smaller animals were safe in their pens. Each task, no matter how small, gave her a sense of purpose and belonging. After completing her chores, she walked to the fields, where Jack was repairing a broken fence. He looked up as she approached, nodding in acknowledgement. "You ready to help with this?" he asked. Clara smiled. "I think I am." Together, they worked on the fence, lifting heavy posts and stretching wires, coordinating their movements. There was a rhythm to their work, a silent understanding that didn't require constant words. Clara felt strong, capable, and connected, not just to the ranch, but to Jack, who had become a steady presence in her life. As they finished the fence, Jack leaned against it, wiping sweat from his forehead. Clara joined him, her own shirt damp from effort. They stood in silence for a moment, surveying their work and the land around them. The storm had been a trial, but it had also been a reminder of the resilience of the land and the people who cared for it. "You did well," Jack said finally, his voice quiet but sincere. "You faced the storm, you stayed calm, and you helped keep everything together. I'm proud of you." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jack shook his head. "You could have. I only guided you. You made the choices, faced the fear, and took action. That's what matters." There was a long pause, filled with a sense of mutual understanding and respect. Clara realized that she had not only survived the storm, but she had also grown stronger, more confident, and more capable of facing challenges in her life. And she realized, too, that her feelings for Jack had deepened. The admiration she had felt was now accompanied by a gentle affection, a quiet longing that she had not expected to feel. As the day went on, Clara found herself moving with a new sense of purpose. She repaired small tools, organized the barn, and even helped Jack plan the upcoming work for the ranch. Each task, no matter how mundane, felt meaningful. She was no longer just a guest. She was part of the rhythm of the ranch, part of the life they were building together. By late afternoon, they took a break under the same oak tree where they had shared quiet moments before. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Clara sat on the grass, watching Jack as he leaned against the tree, his face relaxed and thoughtful. "You've changed," he said after a while, breaking the comfortable silence. "Since you arrived. I mean, you're stronger, calmer, more sure of yourself." Clara smiled, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "I feel different," she admitted. "I've learned that I don't have to do everything alone. I've learned that asking for help isn't weakness, and that trusting someone doesn't mean losing control." Jack's eyes softened. "You've learned well, and you've done it all with grace. I can see it in how you handle the ranch, how you care for the animals, and how you face life now." Clara's heart skipped a beat. The quiet sincerity in his voice made her feel seen and understood, in a way she hadn't experienced before. She realized that she had found something she had longed for without even knowing it, a place to belong, a purpose, and someone who truly valued her for who she was. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they returned to the guest house. Clara prepared a simple dinner, and this time, Jack helped, without hesitation. They moved around the small kitchen with ease, sharing tasks and conversation. There was a warmth and comfort in their cooperation, a sense of partnership that felt natural and unforced. After dinner, they stepped outside to sit on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear night sky. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, and alive with the soft sounds of nocturnal animals. Clara leaned back in her chair, feeling a deep contentment. "You know," Jack said after a while, "life on the ranch isn't easy, but it's honest. It teaches you patience, resilience, and the value of hard work. And sometimes, it teaches you about people, about trust, love, and connection." Clara nodded. "I've learned that. I've also learned that it's okay to let someone in, to accept help, and to care for someone else. I've spent so long protecting myself, and now, I feel ready to let someone be there for me." Jack looked at her, his expression gentle, almost tender. "I'm glad. Because I've been hoping for that too. That maybe, in some way, we could share this life, not just the work, but the moments too." Clara felt a surge of emotion. She realized that the man who had offered her shelter, guidance, and patience had also given her a chance to love and be loved in return. Her pride, once a shield against the world, had softened. She could see now that vulnerability didn't diminish her. It made her stronger, and it allowed her heart to grow. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars and listening to the gentle night sounds. Clara felt a profound sense of peace. The storm, the hard work, the challenges they had all led to this moment. She had found a place where she could belong, where her efforts were valued, and where love could exist quietly, naturally, and without pretense. As the night deepened, Clara and Jack went inside, preparing for bed. Clara felt a sense of gratitude she hadn't felt in years. She had lost much in the city, but here, on the ranch, she had found something priceless: a home, a purpose, and a connection that touched her heart deeply. Before drifting off to sleep, she thought about the journey she had taken, the fear, the struggles, the lessons learned, and the quiet triumphs. She realized that her life had changed in ways she hadn't imagined. She had traded pride for a place to stay, yes, but she had gained far more: self-respect, resilience, trust, and the possibility of love. Clara closed her eyes with a smile, feeling a quiet hope for the future. She knew challenges would come, but she also knew she had the strength to face them, and she knew she would no longer face life alone. Jack, the scarred rancher who had offered her more than shelter, had become a part of her life, and together, they would build a future filled with trust, care, and quiet, enduring love. As she drifted into sleep, the ranch around her seemed alive with promise, the wind whispering through the trees, the soft lowing of cattle in the distance, and the steady heartbeat of a life rebuilt with patience, courage, and the gentle unfolding of love. Clara had found her place, and in doing so, she had discovered the deepest truths of life. That strength lies not in isolation, but in connection, and that the heart is most fulfilled when it dares to trust and embrace love, even when it has been scarred before. The next morning, Clara woke with renewed determination. She stepped outside, feeling the sun on her face and the earth beneath her feet. The ranch awaited, full of tasks, challenges, and opportunities to grow. But Clara no longer felt afraid. She felt ready. She felt alive. She felt at home. Jack was already outside, tending to the horses as always. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. Ready for another day? He asked. Clara smiled back, her heart light. Yes, she said. Ready for whatever comes. And together, they walked across the fields, side by side, ready to face the life they had built stronger, wiser, and united by trust, care, and love.